Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of SuperNova Commencements. I am your host, Kashi Sehgal, and we have a great show for you today, as always. So let's get right to it. We are going to cover first, as we do always, our segment, your career powered through data segment. So today we're talking about sustainability. We're actually talking about a lot of things today, but for this segment, we'll focus on sustainability. It is related to our guest background today. So there are about 700,000 people in the industry, and the average age of the industry is 41, so about average. It's 40% female. So females, we have some work to do to balance that out. We need more females in the industry. Top skills: customer service, project management, and leadership. And the skills that will make you a lot of money or help you have that financial success is strategic planning, operations and business process management, and manufacturing. So we might get into that today too. Across the country, most people come from these schools: Arizona State, Penn State, and Portland State. So that is a little bit about sustainability. Please go to our partners, Steppingblocks, and check them out, and you can learn a lot more about the industry. Okay, so graduates, college students, high schoolers, everyone that we have with us today, we have an amazing guest, and I want to bring her on screen now. If I can do that. There we go. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey.
So everyone, Stephanie, I have known Stephanie for many years. Stephanie is the CEO of Stuckey's Corporation now, but in her past life, she was the past Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Atlanta. She was also the Director of Sustainability. She's been in sustainability for a long time. She was a state representative. She's got a long background. So I want to dive into all of that today with you, Stephanie. Can you tell us where you're from and where you went to school and what did you major in?
Sure. And first, let me tell you where I am right now, because it is really not glamorous, but I think that's part of being an entrepreneur, is sometimes you have to get down and dirty. So we have just purchased a manufacturing facility. We can get into that later. And it's in Rennes, Georgia. And so we're in the process of, I'm in an old office. This building was built in the 1950s, so you can definitely see some of the 1950s decor, and I don't think anyone's cleaned the office since then. So I am in my jeans, t-shirt, and sneakers, and I'm working a lot on the factory this week. So excuse our appearance or progress, but lots is happening. My background: I was born in Eastman, Georgia, Dodge County, just a small town in the middle of Georgia. My dad got elected to Congress when I was a year old, and so we moved up to DC. And I joked that I was kind of like country mouse, city mouse, because I went to school in Washington, DC, had a wonderful education. I went to an all-girls private school. One of my classmates was Michelle Nunn, who I know has been on your show. Susan Rice went to high school with me, who is very high up in the Biden administration and was ambassador to the United Nations under Obama. So really just an amazing, incredible upbringing to be around all of these super bright people. Michael Bennet, U.S. Senator from Colorado, went to high school with me. So I had that background, but then we'd go down to Eastman, Georgia every summer, and I'd live that life, every vacation, every holiday. Then after high school, I went to Vanderbilt University, then the University of Georgia, got an undergraduate degree in French. I'm a big advocate for a liberal arts education. And then I got a law degree at the University of Georgia.
And so, yeah, you did a lot with law throughout your career. Would you please walk us through high level how you got from law school to running a family business now, reinventing it.
Yeah, so it's about 30-year career. I'll try to condense it, but I practiced law for most of my career. I did public defender work, and we can get into some of the transferable skills, but I learned how to think quick on my feet, how to advocate for really tough causes. Because some of my clients, these were tough cases. These were people who did not have money to defend themselves and quite often were accused of some pretty heinous crimes. So I did that for 6 years and ran for the legislature after being a public defender, served 14 years in the legislature. And again, advocated on behalf of a lot of tough causes in the legislature. I continued my advocacy for criminal defense work and justice reform. Criminal justice reform was a big issue that I still care passionately about. And I got super involved with environmental issues in the legislature. So I left in 2012. The best way to leave politics, I did not run for re-election. So I respect people who ran and lost, but I've been so fortunate to not have had that experience. And I ran an environmental nonprofit law firm for several years. We represented Sierra Club and Riverkeepers and protected Georgia's environment. Then my former legislative colleague and friend, Kasim Reed, who's been on this show too, he hired me as head of sustainability for City of Atlanta, which then evolved into head of resilience. And so we were doing sustainability and resilience work. And I went from there to, with the change in administration, I went over to Southface, which is a wonderful nonprofit in Atlanta, and was their head of sustainability. Was happy with that career when I had the amazing and completely unexpected opportunity at age 52 to change careers and buy my family's business. So we can get more into that, but I'm not your typical third generation family member that may have inherited the business, which I totally respect. I wish I'd had that blessing, but I did not. I actually bought the company, and that's where I am now. It's been a year and a half. Crazy journey.
Yeah. There's so much I want to cover. So I think let's start with the nonprofit work. Just want to get a sense from you, your experience. What was it like to run a nonprofit? Sustainability wasn't really something you were trained in. So how did you feel prepared to run a nonprofit that was focused on those issues?
Well, I think the thing that most people don't necessarily realize about running a nonprofit is that you are actually doing two jobs. You are raising money and you're doing the core mission work of the nonprofit. And having run a nonprofit and now running a business, I would say in many ways running a nonprofit is harder. And I don't think that nonprofits get the credit that they are due for actually being business people. It is the hardest job I think I have ever had. You have to have all the skill sets to advocate for your cause. But I think that fundraising piece, too often people don't recognize in nonprofits. And when they get into running a nonprofit, they just think about the mission work, which we all do. That's what entices and gets you passionate about doing whatever it is the mission is, if it's homelessness or hunger issues or housing, or for, in my case, the environment. That's what you're passionate about. And then it's like, oh, by the way, you have to raise the money. So you have to do the core work, but you have to raise the money to do the core work. I had fundraising skills, and I would put forth that it's actually more important to have the fundraising skills than to have the subject matter expertise, because you've got to raise the money to have the organization function. The other challenge with running a nonprofit that people don't realize quite often until you get into the weeds of it, very few philanthropies or donors want to fund admin work. They consider that not essential. And so you'll see all these restrictions on the grants that you put together where they say, well, we don't want this to go towards staffing or equipment. Well, that is critical to running a nonprofit. You can't be successful if you don't have the structure in place. So my hat is off to anyone who is successful in running a nonprofit. But I had the skills, not to sound braggadocious, but I had the skills to raise money. I had done that with my political campaigns. I am not shy about asking people for money if it is a cause I believe in. And I believe in protecting our environment. So I knew how to raise money. I knew how to attract talent. I hired expert attorneys and I let them do what they did really well. I gave them the freedom to try the cases, to find the cases, to pursue the legal strategies they wanted to pursue. And I was there to support them with the financing and the messaging and the communication that they needed to be successful. So I absolutely had the skill set. And you have to be able to market if you run a nonprofit. Quite often you don't have a marketing director. So you're the executive director is the marketing director and the
Head of
chief.
sales, head of everything.
Yeah. And even if you have like the big nonprofits, clearly like CARE that Michelle Nunn runs, that's huge. It's global. She has a whole fundraising team. But when it comes down to it, the number one fundraiser is the executive director. The big donors want to hear from the executive director. And you also have to be able to write well because grants are a huge part of what you do. And you can hire grant writing experts, but I don't think there's any substitute for really understanding the organization. And quite often the grants, I felt the strongest grants we wrote were the ones that I put together because I knew the organization.
Okay, so you mentioned fundraising, and that I think is something that makes a lot of people nervous. Not just, I mean, students for sure, but also especially adults. Like, how do you hone that skill? You said you honed it and developed it because you ran for office. But how did you develop that? Were you always just good at it, or how did you practice?
It does not come naturally. I think there are very few people who feel comfortable coming up and asking someone for money. It's just like public speaking. You're not born thinking that's really fun. That it consistently tops the list of what makes people nervous is, their greatest fear is standing up in front of people and giving a speech. Fundraising is right up there as well. I was very fortunate in office to have the support of some wonderful organizations, including Emily's List, which supports women running for office. And they did a day-long intensive training on how to raise money. And that one day was one of the most informative, enriching learning experiences I've ever had. I've used that skill throughout life, even working for the city of Atlanta, because I raised money for the sustainability division. You can raise grant dollars working in a municipality or in government. So those skills for being able to stand up for your organization or for yourself and ask for money, I really attribute Emily's List. I'll give one quick real life tip is, well, first of all, you just practice. You practice and practice and practice like any skill. You just have to keep doing it. Most people learn best by doing, not by reading or watching a YouTube video. Although those are helpful, you have to really do it. But what they taught me was make the ask. And for women, that's often harder because we are almost hardwired to have people ask us to do stuff. Like, we want you to run for office. We want you to be in the PTA. And sometimes being in office, there aren't people clamoring for you to run for office. Not to be gender stereotyped here, but I found that a lot of my male colleagues were like, oh yeah, I'm running for office. I'm totally qualified. Whereas the women were like, well, somebody asked me, so Emily's List really came out and they said, we want you to run. We're going to tell you how to run. We're going to give you the skills. And they said, when you're asking for money, first of all, you put together your case and you say, I want money to do this. Here's my message. Here's what I'm going to do. And then you ask for a specific amount and you say, I have a prop. I want $500. Can I count on you, Miss Sehgal, for $500? And here's what you do. You embrace the pause. Because I think, especially as women, we're inclined to say, can I have $500 for my campaign? I know times are really tough and I know you've got 2 kids in school and $500 may be enough. And if that's not enough, if that's too much for you, then I'd be okay with 100. It's like, no, just ask. And then embrace that awkward pause. Let Just let it sit out there. And I learned that in business. It helped me in business to say, I really hope that you are going to buy 500 cases of Stuckey's pecan log rolls. And then you just sit there and wait, or you get your prop, you force yourself to take a sip. And you
that is a transferable life skill to pretty much anything you're asking for, any point you want to make. Say it or ask it, and then just stop.
Stop. And you know what? This hydrates you too. So there's a bit, but I'm
2 for 1.
Having a prop, like I just always made sure I had a bottle of water, a glass of water. And I'm sorry, this is not super sustainable, but I'm in Rennes, Georgia, and I'm not entirely sure the water quality here. So I've got my bottle of water that I'm recycling, but have your prop to remind yourself to just make that tough ask, and then you just pause.
Okay, that's such great advice. And if you learn nothing else today, that is a big takeaway. Okay, but you're going to learn a lot more because we're going to keep going. So just quickly, you ran for office. You never lost, which is crazy. You were a state representative for like 13 years.
14. Mm-hmm.
14 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time to never lose. And I'm not surprised because I know you and everyone, if you haven't already figured this out, Stephanie is amazing. But what was it like to put yourself out there? I mean, you said that Emily's List asked you to run and gave you the path forward, but so many people don't run because they have to be in the public eye and they have to put themselves in that public scrutiny. How did you deal with all that?
Well, first of all, I just want to say there are so many ways to serve, and not everyone elected office is not for everyone. Mm-hmm. It is really hard. You are putting yourself out there, and everything you've ever done is subject to scrutiny. So first of all, I'd just say, don't feel like that has to be on your resume in order for you to be a successful public servant. You can be an appointed office. You can work for government. So there are so many different ways to, if you're interested in government work, don't feel like it's the be all and end all to be elected. And I'll never forget my first day as a freshman rep. And I was looking around the room and I was just like so in awe of all my colleagues in the legislature. And one of my colleagues who I've known for years, and before I ever got elected, he's very funny. And he's like, Stephanie, half these folks are dumbasses. Don't worry about it. I mean, no, they're not. They're really not. But just, they're all just people. And sometimes people just get elected because, nobody else ran. That rarely happens. But there's a certain amount of chance and luck in life in anything you do. And certainly you have to be ready for the opportunity. But so I just want to preface with that. But it is scary. For me, I had 2 hard moments. First was when that first mail piece hit and it went to 12,000 homes. And I was just absolutely terrified. I thought, oh my God, people are going to get this mail piece. And I was 32 years old. And now I think that's a decent age. At the time, I remember thinking I was young and I looked younger. And I know people were saying, like, who is this person? And why does she think she can do that? And it's that whole imposter syndrome that I think quite often women get. So I had this total anxiety. And I woke up at like 4 a.m. that day after that first mail piece was mailed. And I knew it was going to land the next day. And I was absolutely petrified. And you just have to just mush on. You just mush on through those tough times. The other thing was just anxiety about everything that I'd ever done coming to light. And honestly, I didn't have anything negative. I had no skeletons in my closet. And so I thought, I'm good. There's no criminal background. And I'm not saying you shouldn't run. I mean, look at Antonio Brown running for mayor, and he's under federal indictment. That was in Bill Torpy's column today. So, whatever. But I was like, I have nothing in my background. I'll be okay. They will find stuff. They will make stuff up. Mm-hmm. So I think you just need to go into that thinking, Whether you have skeletons in your closet or not, it doesn't matter. They will troll you. They will look at everything. And what they actually used against me was that I was captain of my high school cheerleading squad, and I was Miss Georgia Cherry Blossom. And there was a mail piece that went out basically saying I was a piece of fluff. I was just this young piece of fluff with no experience. And they're like, she was Miss Georgia Cherry Blossom. You know, like, she's a dingbatter. I don't know. But I will also say, when they make fun of what you think are your weaknesses, turn it into a strength. Because one thing I learned from that, and I was really hurt when that piece came out, is that you do not mess with beauty queens in the South. Because I had every woman who had ever been Miss Gum Spirits of Turpentine or Miss South Carolina Firecracker. I mean, the South is full of people who had beauty queen titles, and all those ladies came out in full force supporting me. So just don't let them just turn it into a strength. Say, yeah, okay, you know what? I was Miss Georgia Cherry Blossom. I'm proud of it.
Guess what? I got elected to that too.
Yeah, there you go. And what's wrong with being a cheerleader? It was awesome. It's very athletic these days. I love that cheerleaders now are so much more athletic than I was back in the 80s when I was a cheerleader. Nowadays, you have to be able to do aerials and triple back flips. I'm like, cheerleaders are awesome. I'm proud of that.
They are. I also snuck in right before it became like Uber tumbling. So
own it. Own your vulnerabilities. Own what they're making fun of. And the best way to diffuse controversy, tension, people criticizing you is with humor. You just turn it around. You just say, yeah, well, I was Miss Georgia Cherry Blossom. And you know what? I now know the 3 ways to wave, because they teach that in beauty queen school. So I joked about being in beauty queen school, which really isn't a thing, but they did. The Miss Georgia Cherry Blossom pageant, they do, or the National Cherry Blossom pageant, because I went up to the national pageant as representative of Georgia, and they do teach you how to wave. So that was a very useful life skill. There's screwing in a light bulb, there's figure 8, and there's washing a window.
And now we all know.
Things you would not expect. I bet Michelle Nunn didn't have that little pointer.
She did not share that piece of advice.
Michelle.
No.
Michelle's.
So, okay. I want to make sure we get to your time at Stuckey's. So just a brief pit stop. What is a Chief Resilience Officer?
So that was a program funded by and founded by the Rockefeller Foundation. I wish it was still around, but they had a change in leadership, and the new CEO of Rockefeller decided to go in a different direction. Some components of the work that was done under the 100 Resilient Cities program is still being supported by the foundation, but the actual program itself is no longer active. But it was called 100 Resilient Cities, and the Rockefeller Foundation selected from hundreds of applications 100 cities that they were going to support and fund in working on resilience. So resilience is helping cities address not only the shocks that cities experience and communities experience. So a shock is what you might think it would be. It's a sudden, unexpected event. It could be a weather-related event like a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake, or it could be a health-related event like a pandemic. It could be a cyber attack. It could be civil unrest. Black Lives Matter could be a shock. It may not be something that people necessarily think is going to happen, like the George Floyd death. But what's really important is not just cities learning how to deal with the shocks, but the more important aspect, which is the stresses. And a stress is an underlying vulnerability in a community that can impact the entire fabric of the community. So, for example, a stress is going to be economic disparity, lack of education, housing instability. So if there's a tornado and you're in a small rural community where most people live in trailer parks, that underlying stress of housing instability is going to be exacerbated by the shock of the tornado. So the Rockefeller Foundation was really about, yes, we want to deal with the shocks, but more important than the shocks, because you can't anticipate the shocks. By its very definition, a shock is something you don't necessarily know is going to happen. In most cases, you don't know what's going to happen. So you have to address the stresses. And those are the really tough things to address that are long-term. Housing instability, as we've seen in Atlanta, but Atlanta is not the only city. In fact, the number one issue in every single city in the program, the top issues were racial inequities and housing. It was experienced throughout the world. And so this program was created to get all these cities to work together. Each of them would have a resilience officer, and each of them would have a program that was funded through Rockefeller, whereby they could tap into, it was almost a menu of services that Rockefeller was providing. And you would identify your top issues through a resilience strategy, and they would fund support to actually implement the strategy. So that's a really long, very in-depth program that I'm trying to encapsulate. But I think even though the program is no longer around, there are elements of the good work that we did that are still in force in the city of Atlanta. And I think one of the highlights that I'm very proud of, we started the program before the resilience program, but it was definitely elevated through the resilience work, is the urban agriculture work that I did when I was with the city of Atlanta. Mario Camberdello was the first urban ag director and did such incredible work, and working on economic insecurity and access to fresh, healthy food grown locally. There's so many components to that program that deal with resilience.
So you went from running a nonprofit to basically problem solving crises for the entire city. What on earth prepared you for a role like that? Like, what skill set did you call upon, or did you have to develop when you got into that role?
For City of Atlanta, which is unique among municipal governments, I would say, definitely in Georgia, and I would also say in the South, it's a very, very political environment. And you may have all the skills in the world to be director of transportation, or the water department is a good example, where the job actually requires by law that you have to be an engineer. You may have that specific skill set that you need for the job, but I would say the most important skill you need to work at the city of Atlanta is ability to be political and understand all the various relationships. And it doesn't matter if it's Kasim Reed, who's mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, or Maynard Jackson. It's being comfortable in a political environment and being able to form alliances. The best advice I got for working at the city of Atlanta came from former Mayor Shirley Franklin, who I absolutely admire so much. She's one of my sheroes. And I ran into her at Manuel's Tavern the week before I was going to start the job. And there'd been a little blurb in the paper. And of course, she's so up on everything happening. And she saw me in the parking lot, and she did this. She's like, "Come here." And I'm like, "Me?" And she's like, "I'm going to give you some advice, whether you want it or not." And I said, "I want your advice. Tell me."
I can see her saying this.
Right?
Yes.
Whether you want it or not. I mean, give me it. She didn't have the finger going then. She had the finger to like motion me over. She said, "I'm going to give you some advice." And I'm like, "Please, I welcome your advice." And she said, "When you go over to the city, do not lose your friends, your contacts, your colleagues, associates, people you've been collaborating with over the years. Do not lose them from the nonprofit sector, from the state government sector, from the business community. That is how you will be successful, is partnering with outside people." Because yes, I had an overwhelming, awesome task, but I didn't do it alone. I had support from Mayor Reed, and Atlanta is very much an executive driven city. So if you don't have the support of the mayor and you are at a cabinet level position, in my opinion, you can't be successful at the city of Atlanta or any institution where there's a strong executive. You have to have that backing. Same with the Georgia legislature. If you have the backing of the Speaker of the House, you're going to be successful, unless you're a total, with rare exception, like having that support, having that relationship is critical. And then having the relationships with the outside. And I had that going for me. And I took Mayor Franklin's words to heart. And every single initiative, project, program I worked on was collaborative. And women are especially good at that. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like I'm negative stereotyping against men, because there are a lot of men who have good collaborative skills as well. But I do think by our nature, we're used to working with others. We're very team focused. And I didn't do anything without having, almost everything I did had a nonprofit partner, a philanthropy partner, a business sector partner, several partners within the city with other other departments. You can't do it alone.
Yeah. So this goes back to what we hear a lot, which is building that network, creating relationships, really like real authentic relationships, because those are the ones you take with you across career, across job. Like Stephanie is saying, she worked with people she had worked with before or knew before from other things that she was doing. So relationships, again, you're seeing this so important. So Stephanie, I want to now change gears and talk about the family business, Stuckey's. So could you, you're now like running a very different kind of business than you have been in your entire career. Mm-hmm. So why the complete left turn into the family business? And could you tell us a little bit about Stuckey's?
Sure. So I've got my t-shirt on. It says Stuckey's, eat here and get gas. So again, embrace what people make fun of you about, that we're sort of a kitschy company. And for those not familiar with the brand, we have, at this point, frankly, it's a small chain. We have 67 franchise locations. We do not have any corporate owned stores, but we have retail locations that are based on the interstate highway in 20 states, mostly in the Southeast. And we sell gas, souvenirs, we have clean restrooms, and we usually have some sort of quick serve food. Almost all of the quick serve food is an outside entity, like a Dairy Queen or a Subway. So there's a co-branding under one roof. That's what we are today. What the business was is really the very first roadside retail. Before Pilot, Love's, TA, Buc-ee's, any of those, there were Stuckey's before Cracker Barrel. And Cracker Barrel doesn't sell gas, but we get compared to them a lot because of the Southern and the types of merchandise that we sell and the nostalgic candies. But there was Stuckey's. We were founded in 1937 by my grandfather in Eastman, Georgia, as a roadside stand selling pecans. And that at its essence is what we are, a roadside stand, a roadside location that offers travelers a respite. And he was the very first person to realize that when you are traveling on the road, you need a reliable, safe, welcoming place to stop, to fill up with gas, to have a restroom, to get a quick snack. And he sold what we're best known for, pecan-based products. And this is what I'm working on now. This is our pecan log roll. That's probably what we're best known for. But divinity, pralines, fudge, Gophers, flavored pecans. And so at our peak, we had 368 stores in 40 states. We had a billboard and sign company. We had 4,000 billboards all over the country on every major interstate except the Pacific Northwest. We had a trucking company. We had a candy company. I think I may have already said that. So we were kicking it. My grandfather was kicking it. And then he sold the company in 1964, right before I was born. And he sold everything. And there was a series of corporate owners, and the brand really suffered. We lost a lot of stores. The stores were never corporate owned, but the franchises were closing up. And the company was tremendously suffering. The brand was not what it had been. It was trashed. And my dad got the company back through just a series of completely bizarre circumstances, but he pretty much got the company back, and he got the brand, he got the franchise rights, but all those assets like the trucking company, the candy company, all that was gone. And that was in 1985. And my dad ran the company for about 20 years as one of a portfolio businesses that he ran. So Stuckey's was a bit of a side hustle for him, but he gets a ton of credit for keeping the brand alive, for co-branding. He would put us under a roof with other brands. That's how he kept the company going. And he and his business partners retired a little over a decade ago, left a skeleton crew running Stuckey's. And for the past 5 years, the business had been hemorrhaging money. And that's a year and a half ago. My dad's business partners came to me and asked me if I wanted to buy the company because it was losing money and they didn't want it. And I was the only one who wanted it. Nobody else in the family. There were 7 grandchildren. I'm number 5 of 7, number 4 of my dad's 5 kids. I was never the heir apparent to this pecan log roll kitschy souvenir. We sell a lot of rubber alligators, ashtrays that say put your butts here. I was not an heiress to this fortune, but I loved my grandfather. And despite my making fun of some of this, it's good fun. I loved the brand. I remember what it was like when I was very young. The brand was still strong when I was a kid, and we would take road trips and we would pull over, and it was just a magical experience. If you didn't experience Stuckey's in the 60s and 70s, and maybe even late, pre-60s and 70s, that was really when we were at our peak, when the road trip was at its peak. It was a really fun place, and I remember that. And so I'm accepting the company where it is now, which is we've been losing money, but within 6 months, despite the pandemic, which happened 2 months after I bought the company, we started turning a profit because I hunkered down on what was making us profitable, which is the sale of our product. 80% of our revenues from the sale of our product. And so I started controlling our supply chain. I got a business partner, and the two of us jointly bought this. I'm sorry you can't see the facility. You're all welcome to have a tour, but we now own a pecan shelling plant and a candy plant. We went from 10 employees to, during shelling season, we're over 100 employees. So major, major changes.
So you're now in retail and manufacturing.
And supply chain distribution. We have a distribution facility. So my father did have a distribution facility. And so we have a warehouse. So we distribute product. We have about 300 retail clients that sell our product.
Wow.
That's really how we're driving revenue. That, and we ramped up our online presence. We went from maybe making a couple $1,000s a month online to 5 digits every month regularly. Mm-hmm. Our online sales have gone up 550%. We're on Amazon. And so
a little roadside stand is on Amazon selling product. Yeah. I love that you have thought through what you can do to really hone in on the strengths. You said that. That's such a strong point. Please talk about how you have rethought the brand. I think that's an important skill set.
Yeah. So what I learned in business, the most important thing, if you have one takeaway related to business from me, and I'm still learning business, but I also want to say, don't be intimidated if you don't have a business background. First of all, surround yourself with really super smart people and learn numbers, understand financial sheets, but also get yourself a really good accountant. We have a kick-ass CFO, but the most important takeaway is monitor your cash flow. And that's how you're going to be profitable. You got to make sure you have a handle on the cash flow. There's a lot of people who, CEOs have different ways of running companies. I've been a student of entrepreneurs and have been reading a ton of biographies this year. And I've read one on the Chick-fil-A business and Truett Cathy. And Truett Cathy hated debt. I'm not afraid of debt. Sam Walton loved debt. Not loved it, but he wasn't afraid of it. He was highly leveraged. That's a good way of putting it, that you had a lot of debt. My grandfather always had loans out. That's how he was able to grow. But it's managed growth, and it's making sure you've got cash flow the working capital that you need to successfully run the business. So I had to figure out what is generating cash for us. And that's, like I said earlier, I reviewed our financial statements, and 80% of our revenue, I put it in buckets, and I did these spreadsheets where I totaled up all the different sources for us generating revenue. And I figured out everything related to merchandising was over 80%, and the franchise fees were less than 30%, less than 20%. And I thought, okay, I've got to double, triple down on what is making us profitable. And frankly, our product had suffered over the years with outsourcing. And I thought, I can get a handle on the manufacturing end. I can make sure that we are producing the absolute best pecan products you'll find anywhere. And that's how I brought in my background. And that's also how I justified what I was doing, because I care about health and nutrition. I care about what I feed my children. I care about what I put in the marketplace. And frankly, I didn't have a lot of pride in what we were selling. And I had to figure that out. And so, yes, we are still purveyors of candy, but this is no refined sugar, no high fructose corn syrup. I can read this ingredient list and feel so proud, and it tastes amazing. The packaging is terrific. You ask about branding. I went back to our original logo. We'd had a real 80s sort of, I didn't like the logo. So I went back to this sort of classic logo. I think retro is in, and I like to say I'm not living in the past, but I'm respecting the past, and I'm definitely incorporating what we've done in the past, and I'm owning and taking pride in the fact that we are an 80-plus-year-old company. That's a lot to be proud of, and I'm owning the fact that we've had our ups and downs, because I think people can relate to being scrappy, having failures, falling down repeatedly, having a brand that's really suffered over the years, but picking yourself back up, and we're going to make a comeback. People like
Yeah. So what skill sets would you say were a surprise to you that you maybe are using now that you didn't know you had, or you just had to suddenly be good at? How do you do that?
Well, I know your strengths.
Yeah.
Focus on your strengths. Do what comes naturally to you. Do more of that because you're good at that, and then supplement the gaps with people who are really good at what you're weak at. I love the book Strength Finders, which advocates for, you think about in school, and I've done this too. My son was bad in math, so I got him a math tutor. We spent all this time on his math because he was not doing well in math. He was a natural at English, and we didn't spend that much time on English. Well, he's great at English. We should focus on that. He's good at that. Not, you don't want to have your kid fail math, of course. You got to have that basic skill set. But I guess the point being, don't be overawed or intimidated by the fact that you've got gaps. The one consistent trait I've seen in leaders across the board, all the studies I've done in the past year and a half, all the biographies I've read, there's one trait they all have in common, and that's building a team, and building a team that complements their skills. So I have a business partner. We jointly own the company. He's better at finances than I am. He's better at manufacturing. He's better at logistics. But I'm good at branding and marketing. He's actually good at all that stuff too. He's incredibly well-rounded. Surround yourself with really good, smart people, and don't be intimidated by that. See that as a strength, that you've got people around you that may be smarter than you. I've always thought that.
That's a great piece of advice. And we've got a lot of student questions coming in. And one is specifically about what we're talking about right now. Marcus wants to know, why would you not grow the areas of the business that are underperforming?
Oh, I totally plan to, but it gets back to cash flow. The weakest area of our business right now is the consistency and quality of our franchise program. But I don't have the capital for that. And I have tried, and I have reached out to investors. The problem is that the franchising program is not as profitable, and investors want a return on investment. They're less interested in the brand. Private equity and banks private equity is kind of its own animal. I think people, entrepreneurs especially, also often get lulled by private equity. But when it comes right down to it, private equity wants two things. They want control and they want a quick return on investment. They're usually looking for a 3 to 5 year return on investment. So I have pitched to so many private equity investors helping with the franchise program that I can do the pitch in my sleep. I don't think it's my pitch. I'm not trying to sound overconfident in this, but I think it's because I've gotten really helpful feedback. That's the other thing. Don't see your failures as complete failures. See it as an opportunity for learning, because every time I've gotten a no, I've asked why, and I see it as a learning. I've offered people, I've had people that I've declined for job offers before, and they've reached out to me and said, can you ask me why, can you please tell me why I didn't get the job? And I was so impressed with that. In one case, I turned around and hired the person later when I had another opening. So if you get a no, sometimes it's a not now. And sometimes it's an opportunity for growth for you to go back to them and say, why is it that you didn't hire me, give me the funding, whatever? And the consistent response I got was that the franchise program just isn't as strong and it's not attracting investment dollars. Same issue with banks. Banks don't want the control. They're not going to own your company unless, God forbid, you fail and they have the right to seize your assets. Knock on wood, that's not going to happen. But banks are going to want to look at your financial records. So the way we were able to buy a manufacturing facility is my business partner and I have good credit scores. They look at your personal wealth, your personal credit history to make sure that they feel confident in investing in a company that you're running. And they also look at the company you're acquiring. We bought a company that's been around since 1935 that has been profitable the entire time and has a very strong track record. So I could get the financing to control the manufacturing. I don't have the capital financially or the capital staffing person-wise right now to improve the stores. But I absolutely want to do it. But I've got to do things in sequence. I've got a strategic plan. We have a strategic plan. The team has helped put that together. That includes improving the stores as we gain in profitability. And we may have to just do it ourselves. We may have to have the revenue that we're generating in-house to be able to buy and control stores. Having said that, I'm doing another pitch next week to some investors who say they're interested in the store. So I am the eternal optimist, and I will pitch all day long. You never know.
That's all you do. That's all you do as CEO. Pitch everyone in different ways.
And be able to handle rejection. Be okay with that. Just get yourself right back up. The ability to handle rejection is a life skill that will help you so much, not just in business, but in personal life, personal relationships. Not everything works out.
And even when it does, sometimes there are aspects of it that doesn't.
Yeah.
So, okay, you mentioned hiring, and this is a question I like to ask people. Just so real quick, what is a question that your favorite question that you ask during an interview, or like the one thing you look for during an interview when you're trying to hire?
It's probably overstated, but I really believe that this is an essential ingredient is grit. The ability to handle tough times, pick yourself up.
Yeah.
And so I ask a question related to that, and I ask people to share an experience, either professional or personal, where they've really had to overcome something tough and problem solve. And part of the problem solving, I look for a key trait I look for when they tell me how they problem solved is creativity. I think creativity is way undervalued in the business sector. And I point to a great example. I just read the book on the Airbnb. I think it's called just the Airbnb story. I listened to it on Audible, actually. And Airbnb is a cool story in that they had 3 co-founders and they equally share in the job. And it gets to the idea I said earlier, the point I raised earlier about surround yourself with people who complement your skill sets. There's a founder who is a programmer, a coder who knew how to build the software, the platform, which is what it made Airbnb unique from couch surfers and VRBO and some of the others that were out there, they have a really strong platform and they're constantly evolving that. So they had someone that was their skill set. And then they had Chesky is another one of the founders, and he is a graduate of RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design. He's a designer. He's creative, and he goes around and gives talks about the importance of creativity in business. And he is a living testament to that. It's a designer who ended up completely shaking up the hotel industry, which no one thought you could come up with something new and innovative. That's the other thing. Like, there is always a better mousetrap.
Mm-hmm.
I look at a good example is Wendy's. When Wendy's came around, there was McDonald's, there was Burger King, there were some others, but it's really McDonald's and Burger King. And people were like, what makes you think you can build a better burger? Come on. And my hat's off, Wendy's built a better burger. I'm vegetarian, but they built a better burger. So there is always a better something.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid to come out and say, you know what? The taxi industry needs some shaking up.
Yeah.
And we think people can drive their own cars.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone thought Airbnb was crazy. They thought they were crazy. People are going to let people sleep on their couches? That's insane.
And that's a story, you guys, that you should really check out because they were creative in so many ways you don't even know. So I'm not going to ruin it for you, but check it out because it's really entertaining and interesting how they funded themselves as they got through their initial days of Airbnb.
Yeah, they got a lot of venture capital funding and
yeah. But they also did something else that was very interesting, and but you guys have to look it up, okay?
I won't give a big reveal.
Okay. So we've got more questions coming in. Tad wants to know, what is a decision you made early in your career that you wish you had not?
I get asked that, and I honestly don't have a good answer because I embraced the failures. They weren't failures if you learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have a regret. I don't really point to something and say that was just such a huge, colossal mistake. There are things I've done that failed miserably, and then I just picked myself up. I'll give an example of a miserable failure. Just, I was bawling my eyes out. It was so bad. As a freshman rep, I had these 3 guys in Birkenstocks come to me, and they all brewed beer in their basement, and they were Georgia Tech grads, and they were super smart, and they had come up with all these recipes for home brewing. And they said, Georgia has this law that caps the alcohol content of beer at 6%. And we think that should be changed. I'm like, oh my God, that's such an easy fix. We just cross out 6 in the code and we put in what percent do we want? And they said 14%. So we put in, that was table wine. So we're like, wine's 14%, beer should be 14%. There were 800 varieties of beer at the time you could not buy in Georgia because of this limit. 6%, by the way, for those of you who know your beer, that's like Bud and Miller and PBR, not to trash those brands, but if you like really good ales and lagers, they're all higher alcohol content. And I thought, oh, this is so easy. I got my ass kicked with that bill. I had the Christian Coalition. I had the Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I had educators. I had everyone was opposed. Oh, and then the big beer industry. They didn't want it passed. And they are super, super powerful under the Gold Dome. The alcohol distributors, they're crazy powerful. And so I naively dropped this bill, and I actually somehow got it on the floor of the House. I got it out of committee. I got it out of rules. I got it on the floor, and I presented the bill in the well, and I thought I had a few questions on it. This is a breeze. And then they had like 15 speakers lined up against me. It was brutal. It was brutal. I had people calling, emailing me, saying, I literally had one woman say that I was the devil. I was getting people drunk, and everyone in her family was an alcoholic. And here I was promoting alcoholism, blah, 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 blah. Alcoholics Anonymous was against me. And it was terrible. That bill went down in flames. I went in the ladies' room and started crying. And Mary Margaret Oliver, who's still in the legislature, came in, and she heard me crying. She went in the stall. She handed me a tissue, and she said, "Don't ever let them see you cry." And I was like, yes, ma'am. She's like, try your face and you mush on. And that's what I did. I introduced the bill again. Next session, lost again, introduced it again, built a coalition, got a Republican lobbyist who had ties to the Christian coalition. He tamped them down. They were still not for me, but he quieted them down. I got that sucker passed. And that's the best thing I ever did. So if you drink a high alcohol beer, I'm just saying, thank me.
I will say thank you right now. I did not know that was you, but I'm not surprised.
Terrible failure. Terrible. Like if I'd stopped right after that, I would have said that was the worst decision I made. I was listening to those guys in Birkenstocks, and what do they know? They didn't know politics. I didn't know politics either. By the way, one of those guys in Birkenstocks, turned out his wife was the executive director of one of the most important philanthropies that I went seeking money from many years later. And she's like, oh, my husband just loves you. My husband. And I'm like, who's your husband? And so
relationships.
Be nice to everyone. You never know.
You never know.
You never know. Someone who's like your intern one day could end up running the state.
This is an applicable question. Molly wants to know, do you miss practicing law or miss politics?
No. I made deliberate decisions to move on, and I can still be engaged. Like I said, there are many ways to serve, and I still practice law every single day. I'm still a member of the bar, and I actually reviewed a trademark licensing agreement for our trademark this morning. And I'm doing a lot of stuff in-house to save us money. I write contracts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't practice the practice of law, and I get all this advice, which they're right. Like, you're not political. You're running a company. Businesses can't be political. You can't, But I have friends in politics, and I'm still going to help them out. So it's got to be a really special candidate, but I am trying to be less political. And they have gotten me to stop being political on LinkedIn. So the business platform, I don't do politics, because it is true. I'm a Democrat, but Republicans get gas too, and Republicans buy pecan log rolls. And so, was it Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy sneakers too?
It's true.
But I'm still involved.
Okay, so I don't know if you're still working with, or if you're working with family or friends, but Angela wants to know, people say not to work with family and friends. How do you make it work?
I bought the company outright. Yeah, I think that's actually pretty good advice. It's really hard. This is crazy. I was in a meeting the other day, and I got a phone call, and I normally don't pick up calls if I don't recognize the number, just because, like many of us, we've got so much going on. But I just had this little sense, like, pick that phone up. And I was like, excuse me, let me just check real quickly who this is. It was Joe Rogers, former CEO of Waffle House.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, Stephanie, I read about you in the paper. I just want you to know, I'm just so proud of what you're doing. I'm like, oh, thank you. And I referenced Waffle House in the article. And he's like, I heard where you mentioned Waffle House and that you admire our brand. I'm like, I sure do. And I just said, do you have advice for me? And he talked about how when he took on Waffle House, his father founded Waffle House, Joe Rogers Sr. He's Joe Rogers Jr. And he's actually now retired. He's on the board. He's no longer CEO. He retired about 6 years ago, but he is still very involved. And he said he shored up ownership. He's like, I had to buy out family members. Running a business is hard enough. Running a family business can be harder. And actually, I have a nephew who's involved in the business, but he owns and operates 2 franchise locations. So there's a nice demarcation of he's in that space and I'm in this space.
Mm-hmm.
But my father and I bought out his business partners first. And after 6 months, I bought out my father, and it took some convincing to buy him out. But I recognized if I did not buy out my father, I could either have a father or I could have a business partner, but I wasn't going to have both. And my mom intervened, and we went to him and it's like, I said, either you sell me your shares or I'm walking away.
Okay. So that's how that went down.
That's
Angela.
my personal experience. For those families that can do it, God bless them. I found, and I've got a business partner too. So I like the fact that I've got someone else helping me with this that's not a family member, that dynamic is not there.
Okay. This is a mask question. John wants to know, what is your opinion on businesses requiring masks to enter?
That's a tricky one because I'm in a small town in rural Georgia, Jefferson County. It's population 1,900. And Eastman, Georgia is where our distribution facility is, our manufacturing facilities and brands. And we have some people who are deeply religious. And I respect that. And this is not just me making a political statement. I am religious, and I respect people's beliefs. And even if they're different from me, I respect people who have strong beliefs. And they sincerely have these heartfelt beliefs, these strong beliefs. Oh, sorry. That they don't want to get the vaccine. Here's what makes, and I just read where the EEOC, the Equal Employment Commission, right, came out with some regs, and they said that you can require mask wearing, but you have to offer exceptions for religious. I think there's some other exceptions. We're fortunate in that we run a food safety business. We run a food processing business, and we have standards. We just got certified, SQF certification. It's independent certification, but all the big retail brands require SQF certification. Part of SQF certification is you have to be masked. You have to be masked, you have to be gloved, you have to have a hairnet on. It is so glamorous when I'm back in the candy plant. And so people have to be masked anyway. So it's kind of like, sorry, I thought I cut this off. That's my failing with technology. So it hasn't been as much an issue. And then the few people who do have desk jobs, they have their own offices, or they're spaced far apart. It's really not an issue. So that's how I've handled it. If I had a bigger company where there really was an issue, I would enforce mask, and I would provide an exception. I would follow the law. And if we had the money for it, I would make vaccines available. I wish we did. We don't have the financing for it. What we have done is told employees they can take time off to get the vaccine. I'm double vaxxed, and I make it very clear I'm double vaxxed and that I believe in it, and I encourage people, but I'm not going to make them feel like they have to.
Yeah.
It's a hard question, and I respect different people.
I hate to end it on such a hard question, but I think we need to leave it there because we're like overtime with Stephanie. No, this is great. With this, so much great information. So, folks, next week we have Leanne Reckhoff. She does brand activation with Warner Media. She has been in sports. She's been with Turner. She's been in other media. So we're going to talk about brand activation and all that cool stuff with her. Please make sure that you're signed up for the mailing list. Please go to supernovacommemncements.com, sign up. You'll get all the cool offers and scholarship things and internship opportunities and all kinds of stuff. And then, congrats to all the graduates. And we are very proud of you. Stephanie, do you have any closing thoughts for our students?
Well, I have a closing offer. And I sincerely mean this because I've had a lot of mentors in my life. And I'm actually less a fan of like a formal mentorship as I am just people along the way. Like that moment with Shirley Franklin, 15 minutes in the parking lot of Manuel's Tavern made such an impact on me. And so I think you can provide these moments where there are nuggets that are relevant to you and where you are. And so any of you who want to have a 30-minute call with me, Zoom, phone, come visit me in Rennes, Georgia or Eastman, Georgia, I have that offer. Just share my information, Kashi, probably
LinkedIn. Email. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll put that in the show notes and get y'all connected to Stephanie. That's an amazing offer. And if you don't take her up on that, then shame on you. So, because actually I plan to right after this.
And I'm not offended if you don't, because different people, you have to have a fit with person you're asking advice from. They might, it may not be relevant to your journey, but if to the extent that you think I can help you talk through stuff or just be a sounding board, just listen to what you have to say, I make that offer.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. I know our students appreciate it. Students, remember, it's a blessing to be a blessing. Have a great week. Be kind to people this week, to today. It has a ripple effect, just like we talked about with our guests last week. There are ripples. So stay safe and healthy, and we will see y'all next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.